So we have been looking at the stuff that was done in the groups yesterday. And so we're going to pivot a little bit. Is there anybody here who wasn't here yesterday? I'm trying to figure out. If that's true, that's fine. Well, let me. I want to try to maximize the amount of time because one of the key things we want to do today is spend some time on looking at the work done and doing some feedback. We have kind of on the backside determined that we need a lot more time to digest some of this stuff. And so we may extend this work into a live session in July, date TBD, but that's always been in part of the plan that we would have a live session in July. So for those of you, real quick, for those of you who were not here, let me just flip through here real quick on the slides, and then I will hand it over to Ruben, and then we will break into the rooms. So let me share my screen. And I'm not going to go ahead. I'm not going to play this. I'm just going to flip through these real quick in the interest of time. So the idea here is that what we're trying to do is connect teaching activities with specific technologies for our education system on Mars. And in order to do this, well, the long-term plan here is that we're going to create a website first, and then hopefully eventually a printed report, which may become an annual thing where we help people decide, okay, I want to do this in my classroom. Here are the tools that are most appropriate for what you're trying to achieve. And that's kind of where we're going with this. These slides are all available, freely open online. And so let me give you that in the chat here real quick, because we will be using this slide sheet to do our work today as well. Hold on, let me find the missing chat window. All right, there we go. There we go. So I'm going to drop it in again if we have some more latecomers. We're, as a framework for this to start with, we're going to be using Diana Laurillard's conversation framework, but specifically her learning types, the 6 things there. And we've already been working with these for about a year now in various ways. And so if you have questions about that, your facilitators can help you with that. We're going to be looking at the end here today, evaluating these things. Ruben will be using his SAMR model as a way of looking at how much we have reshaped our learning missions going forward. And so that's what we'll be using the SAMR model for. And then in order to find our tools, we have this wonderful database from the SUNY folks called EmTech, the link for which is right here. And there we go. Robin has put that kindly in the chat. And that's where you'll be looking for tools, although we've already got some tools in place, and Ruben will talk about where we want to go with those. What we've decided to do is build up off of the work that was done yesterday and use that as a launching point for deeper discussion rather than adding a separate activity. If for some reason you have something you just got a burning reason to put out there, we can certainly talk about that in the debrief. So the idea is we'll have 3 groups, blue group, green group, and gold group, and you will be using these 2 slides to put your responses on. And that's about it. I'm going to throw it over to Ruben. Ruben, do you want me to leave the slides up, or do you want to control the screen?
Why don't I share my screen? I've got a couple of, I've created a couple of consolidated slides to explain. So,
okay,
right, so
sounds good.
Let me go ahead and let's see, hit that and share that screen. And let's see, you should all now be seeing the slide for the blue team. So to do a quick recap then, yesterday, Tom has already described the activity. What we're going to do today is to build up on each team's activity. So very briefly, the blue team was looking at having students produce a building material for the colony. And the team has identified some things that the students need to learn about, the types of structures needed, and therefore creating models and so on. And they've identified at least some initial set of tools with which to accomplish this. So this all looks great. What we'd like now for the blue team to do is to develop this into an actual unit of instruction. It doesn't need to be everything they would do about building materials for the colony. It would be, okay, you've got the general pieces of the puzzle, if you will, put together then, and then use that slide and as many slides as you like, a unit of instruction that would bring this all together in terms of what these students would actually be doing in at least part of this project. For the green team was looking at developing a food source for the colony grown on Mars. And what you have here is that we're looking at the simulations of cooperative farming, some interesting references there, as well as some interesting tools. Again, as with the blue team, what we'd like to see the green team do now is to take it a little bit further, add any additional materials or tools that they see necessary, and describe a little bit more how this would look as an actual unit of instruction to be involved in developing the food source for the colony. And finally, the gold team was spread out over 2 slides. So I've put the 2 slides here on one, just so you can see them more concisely. And this team was looking at getting students to think about how you would insert an orbital vehicle for a Mars landing. So once again, you've got good identification of tools and then good identifications of some of the activities, etc., to be developed by the team. As with the other 2 teams, once again, say, okay, let's bring this all together as a unit of instruction. Now, that's a quick summary of all of this. A couple of other things that people had asked us about yesterday that we had left open, but in the interest of, for people who are still uncertain, putting this a little bit more concrete terms. First things first, the students that we're talking about teaching are going to be on Mars. They're going to be the first students in a Mars colony. And it's important that as you're thinking about seeing all of this, as you're thinking about how you would go about constructing these units of instruction, that you think about this colony as a real colony. This isn't the McMurdo base in Antarctica. You know what happens with the McMurdo base in Antarctica if tomorrow somebody can't ship them food and supplies and fuel and all of that? It goes bye-bye. Okay, so that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about a base on Mars that needs to keep getting supplies. Maybe that's the first generation. Maybe the first generation, sure. We ship a ton of stuff from Earth and may mine some stuff from asteroids and get to Mars, but thereafter it has to become self-sufficient. So this is the first generation of students on Mars that are in the process of that colony becoming just that, self-sufficient, a true colony, not just a research station. And the second thing is that we've been asked about is what do the students look like, etc. Well, this is the first generation of students on Mars, but age-wise, you want to be thinking about these students somewhere in the late high school to early college domain. If any of you would like to play or work with a different population, that's great. But let me tell you why in particular those groups or that student population would be a particularly fruitful one. In terms of what I was just saying about the colony, you're going to need a population of people who basically look an awful lot like some of the people that today on Earth go to tech schools and go to different tertiary education institutions with a strong tech focus, in the sense that you're going to need a lot of people who are very good at crafting new solutions, making new things. So that's a population you're looking at. So as you're thinking about, geez, what would we do differently with these activities than what we might have done traditionally on Earth or traditionally in the past and so on? Think about that too. How can your activity help develop these students so they have the right, not just skill set, but also mindset, also integration of how they think about all of those aspects together, so that they can be behind this, colony in the process of becoming. So those are the key aspects that we wanted to fill in from yesterday. I'm going to switch off my slides now, since you don't need to be looking at this forever and a day. And what we're encouraging people to do is to then go back to the group you were in yesterday, if you were already in a group yesterday, or if you're in a new group today, by all means, pick one of the 3 groups, which are one you like best, and join them. You can jump in. But again, I want to encourage you to think about that aspect. I keep coming back to what are going to be the new challenges? What's going to be, what needs to be new, and build that into your unit of instruction. Don't think you have to cover everything. You can't. You're going to have 20 minutes or so to work on this, but focus on that. What would be different? What could we change? What could the tools enable that couldn't have been done otherwise? I realize that right now you're working with the tools you have today, and you might say, well, by the time the colony comes around, there'll be more sophisticated tools. I'm happy if you build in some of that. You say, well, I saw these tools in the database, and if this tool only had this feature, we could do X. Great. If that's the case, then write that into the activity. We would also develop, as part of our tool set, a modification or addition to this tool that would allow us to do X, or Y, Z. Absolutely. That's exactly the kind of thinking we would like you to see or do. Robin has put a wonderful summary of all of these key things in the chat. You've also got the slides, you've got the EmTech links. Those have been repeatedly shown up. So again, thank you, Robin, for people who've joined us later. So I think we're getting ready to go to the activity. So why don't I hand it back to Tom then?
So a couple things. First of all, if there's a tool that you know of that you can't find in the wiki, it is a wiki. So that means we can add to, you can look at adding to that collection in that database. So don't forget that is certainly an option. Just because it's not in EmTech yet doesn't mean you can't get it there. So that's one of the beauties behind this wonderful tool that SUNY guys have created. I'm trying to sort of think through here. Is there are there at least one or two people from each group? Do we have people from, I'm worried that we don't have enough people to break up into groups because there's only 4 or 5. So if you could in the chat real quick, if you were here yesterday, put what group you were in.
Tom, we can also put people in groups, and then if there's only 1 or 2 people in a group, we can move them into another room.
Yeah,
Mara,
it's
were
just
you
that
in one of the groups
the work
yesterday?
is associated. Sorry, what?
I was asking Laura if she was in one of our groups yesterday.
Oh,
Me, Laura,
yeah.
I was in the green group.
Green group. Okay.
Okay.
Great. So we
So
got
we
2
have-
greenies back.
So we have Cynthia and Laura in the green group. Excellent. Maya,
Anybody
would you
from
go in one of
blue
the
or
groups?
gold?
Okay.
I'm just visiting. There is no just visiting, Maya. We're going to put you to work. Don't run away.
I wonder if we want to just work together on the green group with the 5 folks that are here.
Okay, so
Okay.
Zena came with Maya. So Zena and Maya, he said, would
All
you
right,
like
so-
to join us, or would you like to work with join the green group, or would you like to work with one of the other groups?
Can I make a suggestion that we sort of lump together the evaluation with the work and just sort of work our way through the slides and throw it open to anybody to make suggestions about how what kind of learning activities we would want to design for each one of those prompts. So and then we'll just go through the groups. Does that make sense? And then you can be talking about, then you can follow up at the end of each groups and then talk about how that relates to SAMR, and then we just sort of go that way through it. I'm just afraid we're going to end up with one person talking to themselves, if that. Because
let's make it even simpler,
Yeah.
Tom. I think we have a group that was already green yesterday, and we have enough people to join in green. So why don't we all just work with the green group and just focus on that one?
Okay.
I don't think we have.
Yeah.
That sounds
I
good.
think that'll be the simplest way.
Yeah, and if we have time, we can look at the other 2. We'll start with green. There's no problem with doing that for sure. Okay.
So when since we're doing the green, there's no need to go to a breakout room if we're all here. So why don't we?
Yep.
So there's the
You
link to
wanna-
the slides that
Who
everybody
wants
is
to control the slides? So we're not going to. Yeah. Let's just. We're going to blow off the breakout rooms. I think we've made that call. So
Mhm.
we'll just all work together. Makes recording simpler too. We get to hear, everybody gets to hear everything. So the question is, who wants to share the screen? You want me to do it, or you want to?
I can
So
share.
everybody has a link to. Let me share the screen, and then everybody can look at it themselves because you can click into the thing. Does everybody have a link to the to the
The slides, I just put
slide
it in the
deck.
chat. And I'm wondering if we
Okay.
want to let Laura and Cynthia kind of talk about what they put on the
I agree.
green slide yesterday.
Yeah, let's start
I
with
agree.
them. Absolutely. So there we go.
Yes. Hi, this is Cynthia. Hello.
Hello.
Hey,
Yeah. Yesterday, our mission was, of course, to grow food on Mars. And of course, we didn't know that you were already there and it was time to eat. So we thought we were at the early stages of growing food on Mars. So when we looked in the wiki, we, of course, naturally went for simulations and growth. And then we put some photos up. One photo that Josh put up, I think, was or Melanie, was the Martian where he's growing the potatoes, remember, in the movie? And then next to it, I put one of our biodomes on Interstellar where we're working on sustainability and growing, not just growing food, but also changing the planet to a breathable planet so it can sustain life, because living in domes is a short-term solution in our view. So we picked some Google tools, AR, VR tools. We looked at some collaboration tools. We looked at 3D printing. When we searched for food and for gardening, we didn't really get any hits on the wiki. Of course, because the tools are mostly about, organizing ideas rather than targeted to specific, topics like that. So then we thought about our use cases, and we thought, well, first we need to diversify, maybe work on some different strains, food quality and nutritional value. And then, of course, I think it was Josh who came up with 3D printing for printing our food. And of course, that would help us early in the process, because before you grow anything, what are you going to eat? So that's how far we got at this point. Did you have something to add, Laura?
We were just sort of playing around with ideas. We didn't get too far yet into the EmTech materials, but we felt that it would be really necessary for students to understand the human body, biology, medicine. And so that was, I don't know if it actually got put up there. That was one area where we felt it was important for them to have access to information. And another discussion that came up was, do we need to think about food like we do on Earth? I mean, are we trying to recreate farms, or could we think about foods that can be synthesized, created, so that 3D printer is a great idea. Looking at places on Earth where there are different kinds of life forms, thinking of like the volcanic underwater vents. So maybe getting away from the traditional idea of we need cows and apple trees. And so that kind of takes us more into chemistry. So those were two areas that we felt it would be really important to start discussing. And I have to say, we really got hung up on who are we teaching, how much do they need to know, how much do they know. So we were at the very early stages of what kind of food would it be and what would they need to know in order to produce different kinds of food, not just growing.
I think that's actually a great concept. So because I agree. By the way, there's no way you're going to have a Mars colony and be able to just say, yeah, sure, we'll have an apple orchard. If you've ever had an apple orchard on Earth, you know how much trouble it is just to get an apple orchard to produce on Earth, let alone trying to figure out how on Earth you'd get it to produce on Mars. So that's an interesting question. So other, for both of you, as well as those of you who are with us today who weren't yesterday, questions that people have so far from what you've seen on the slides, what you've heard. Cynthia and Laura discuss. All right, so let's play this out a little bit more then. One of the questions I had is from what you've described and what's on the slide, and I can certainly see some of what you've mentioned already. I won't come back to the idea of the new ideas about food and what food is, etc. I'm curious though, you have a Google AR, VR tools on the list. Since we've got Maya as a specialist in that field, I'm curious to hear what you had in mind, and then Maya, if you've got some thoughts or some ideas, let's rush it out then.
Well, we've been working on simulations of growing and also simulations of altering the atmosphere. And we have a game we've designed in a virtual world, an open simulator that actually rolls through this, where we fly people up to the space station that we've recreated, and then we fly them from there in a heavy lift launch to Mars. And then when they're on Mars, we have them go through some of these things. So I was thinking of taking what we've done to the next level, because we really haven't thought through all the different things we might grow, how long they take, their growth cycles, and then if we were going to develop different strains, what that might be like. What ifing some of it in a simulation gives us a rapid way of visualizing the results, rather than just look it up, and figure out what it was like on Earth. We'd have to adapt to the conditions on Mars, even if we're working in biodomes and with samples that we brought from Earth. That will only last for so long. So we have to adapt the terrain, to fit the problem, right? So the simulations, what I was thinking was a faster way of analyzing the results, so we don't have to wait 30 to 60 days to see how we're doing.
Excellent. That sounds very good. So again,
how about making the students push the boundaries a little bit more in terms of, not just the simulations, but in terms of going outside the quote unquote rules to develop new approaches to things. How can we stimulate creative problem solving in ways that do not fit into a formulaic path necessarily? Because we're going to need new and interesting ways of dealing with things on Mars. There's a lot of raw materials there, but what are we missing? How can we get the things that we're missing?
So I have
yeah, go ahead.
Question. So I know I was in here yesterday, so I'm just jumping in. And I apologize if you're like Zena,
Jump
you are
away.
so on the wrong planet. That's not Venus. But thinking about, so as the universe would have it, I actually have a friend who works for NASA, and he's an architect, and that is his mission, is to build the habitat for when they go to Mars. And so he talks a lot about considering what can you bring, because the equipment, you don't have a lot of space. So that really made me think about using the 3D printer to build whatever it is that you're going to need to create or harvest or grow anything, because you're like, you can't just put a backhoe on a spaceship and say, let's bring it with us. It was one of the things that I was thinking about. And then as we talk about technology, do we have space in there for them to interact with other subject matter experts outside of their group?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, how do we get to a diverse teaching environment where we're not just talking to the chemists, we're also talking to the biologists and the structural engineers, and bringing all of that together in the conversation? Are there tools for that to sustain? I mean, I'm trying to remember, this group is, collaboration is an important part of this particular group's mission as well. So how do we rethink collaboration beyond the classroom and come up with a diverse and let the students figure out who they need for their help as well?
Zina, since you mentioned that you were talking about this yesterday and talking with your friend, I'd like to hear more, for instance, about, so what type of approaches are they taking now to, again, get people thinking along these lines, get them to really expand how they're thinking about this?
So he's done some Zoom meetings with me with fifth graders. And so he's had them understand that, if you send 6 people, that they'll be on Mars for 2 years. So he's like, by the time you leave Earth and come back, you will be in the 7th grade because it takes that long. And he was
Right.
explaining that the space you have to live in really is about the size of a classroom. And so he's like, within that space, you have to challenge yourself. You're going to live, eat, sleep, handle all types of personal functions in that space. And how do you set that up in such a small space and not lose your sanity? I think that was the other thing that he was trying to explain to 10 and 12-year-olds is you can't like just go outside and play football. Like, what are you going to do? And so those were things that were sort of blowing the kids' mind, because you watch too much TV and the domes in the movie are huge, and having them be like, wait a minute, I got to do all this with numerous people in such a limited space was what was causing awe for the students.
Yeah.
So now,
The good news is technology has gotten a lot simpler. We don't have to pack a bunch of cassette tapes when we have our movies with us, or VHS tapes to take. I mean, for music and movies, we can digitize everything.
But even that, they're talking about for on this not the space shuttle, whatever the thing is, the space station, trying to figure out how to have exercise. So he's like, for you to get on an exercise bike, yes, you can pedal it in space, but because it's zero gravity, you have no resistance. He's like, there's a lot that you have to think through and accommodate for. I can't just take the Earth version of it with us somewhere. And so
Yeah, absolutely.
that was interesting too, because it was like,
And then what happens when it breaks?
yes.
Oh, but the good news is that one of the most popular actually genres in virtual reality is actually fitness. So I think that will solve a number of different issues, not only that the limited amount of space, but also the variety of different exercises you can do in VR. And so I think that actually this is going to be a very popular sort of way for people to relax, because the other popular genre is mindfulness. So people actually can go in virtual reality and really actually meditate and help them meditate and do yoga and do other things that are really, that really will help them, stay both mentally and physically fit, and that will have to adapt. But I want to go back a little bit to the AI VR tools and to Ruben's prompt, because there's, I think, an opportunity here, given that we'll be in a completely new space, in a new planet, and it actually stems from usually like things that actually have to do right now, right here on Earth, because of the climate change, meaning that we're not going to grow tomatoes the same way, and the same kind of tomatoes that we grew for centuries, because or grape or anything, because climate is changing that. And I know there's a session on that as well. But what we'll have to do is actually have to find a way to do hybrids. And, those in kind of sustainable agriculture know that, basically what that means is pairing a tomato with another fruit or another vegetable that, can actually be resilient to, and grow in a way that, with less light, with less soil, with different types of minerals, and then will continue to be and even be bigger and feed more. And so I think that that's the opportunity for, that sort of trend of thought that, when we go on Mars, we actually probably will have to develop plants and vegetables and fruits and nutrition that actually can survive and can produce for the community there at the right rate, which may not mean necessarily the same way we cultivate things on Earth, meaning that a 60, it takes a plant to develop in 60 days, say, for example, that may change. We may develop hybrids, and that's one way to actually accelerate that and be able to simulate that and kind of realize, well, maybe, pairing a tomato and an eggplant is what makes them, what makes them actually better suited for this environment. And so I think that's where I think both the science and the VR, virtual reality opportunity and applications work well. And then let me close it. Well, most people that will go on Mars will not have all the skill set, right? Thanks, Zena. Will not have all the skill set. Will they, some people will have different expertise that they'll bring in. And that's great, but they'll have to, constantly actually, communicate with scientists that may be on Earth, maybe in another planet, maybe on the moon and other places. And then again, that, that's another way to very effectively do that through virtual reality applications, which will allow them to communicate and actually look at sort of some of the research, collectively and advise people that might be new to this, to agriculture and agriculture on Mars. So I think there is obviously, these are only a few of, the things that, were somewhat mentioned, but just connecting them together in terms of what would that mean on the next level, not just using it as we know we can use it today. So, yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, that
what kind of resources,
brings up-
Maya, would you add to our activity to help the students? Any ones that you know of that would help the students do what you were just describing, the learners?
Well, I mean, I think that we don't yet have simulations that are particularly centered over, developing sort of plants and vegetation that can live in this place. So I think that's an opportunity. It's a gap. But if we are to design some of that, that may be something that pre-mission or during mission 2 years one can develop. I think for the social and more collaborative tools, they exist, and there are different social platforms in VR that educators are using, depending on on their access and level of sophistication.
Maya, let me ask you a follow-up question, because again, from your experience working with students, if you had to pick from VR, XR type tools, the ones that, if you will, have the maximum, cost benefit ratio, the ones that you say the students had this experience and go, oh my God, they completely changed how they were thinking. Anything you can think of that would be worthwhile highlighting, whether it's a tool or an experience using a tool that you would say has that particular type of potential?
I mean, I think that in general, it is so very much topic specific, right? And there are students that benefit today from science and STEM-like simulation, just learning, understanding how things work, on a molecular level or on a bio level, and so that's for them, that's an advantage. And there are students that are interested, that are kind of taken by the idea that you can be represented as an avatar in a virtual space. I think it really, I think what's like, I wouldn't say, and it is, I don't know that a particular A1 application that fits all. I think that different students are taken by different things, but I think it also varies. Some applications are very limited and in scope and what they do. Just understanding molecules and how they work, but that that's good even in of itself. It depends a lot on what we do with them and what kind of you know, what kind of application people do. But one thing I could think of that will be a hit actually on this mission is, you know, Google Earth's VR, because people want to see their home and they want to visit the parks they visited, and they want to and actually feel like they're sitting by the ocean or by, you know, their neighborhood. And so I think one particular app that will be a hit at that mission will be Google Earth's VR. That's my sense. In addition to like more specific, that could be like, you know, whether it's the agriculture or this and that, you know, social apps, social VR apps that, you know, seem to be kind of coming around. But yeah, that will be my guess, that will be a popular.
You know, a quick anecdote here that you just reminded me of. Many moons ago, when you couldn't get just the satellite views from Google Earth and so on, one of my nephews bought me as a Christmas gift a satellite picture of my home. It was just when you were able to start buying satellite pictures for areas, but before the days of Google Earth, etc. So I remember, you know, how amazed I was. Oh my God!
Yeah,
I can have my Google. I can have a satellite picture of my home. So you're right. You're absolutely right. That's.
I remember when Google Earth opened their platform for consumers, same like you, and I had not been home for a really long time as an international student, and I opened it up and I Googled my address, and not here it was my street, and our car was like Google has captured our car parked outside, and I had not seen our car for a long time, and it was just like, oh my gosh, this is my street, and here's our car that I know so well. So yeah, I think that these things are, you know, like actually quite, you know, emotionally will help people, you know, with that trip and that journey we need to make, especially, you know, given the conditions.
I completely agree. And, you know, one of the things I love about doing these types of sessions is that people bring up ideas, topics that will be important both for what happens as well as for the students. So there's a comment from Cindy in the chat that says, whether we are talking growing a garden, raising cattle, or just living as humans, none of those options will be possible without water. Consider how much water we have on Earth. Would the limited water that is available on Mars be enough, or would we need to somehow produce water? And that's a great question. So again, I don't know, Cindy, if you want to say anything more about it, but I think it's a great one for, you know, people to think. So how do we incorporate that aspect into what's being discussed?
Sorry, I'm going to reference a movie here. If you all watched The Martian, that was a great movie. And but I mean, water is essential to us. I mean, we can't do any of the things that we've talked about today without water. And I mean, what is it? 75% of our planet is covered with water. And even though Mars might have it on, you know, the poles or underneath, we would have to somehow bring up that water if it was accessible or usable. If it wasn't usable, would we be able to make it usable? And if we couldn't do that, then we would have to come up with some way to produce it. And so, I mean, there's just a lot of variables there that I think almost everything we're discussing is going to rest on us being able to access water in whatever form that ends up being.
Agreed. So again, what tools, what processes, what may we have the students do or see or experience to get them to, you know, aside from watching The Martian, which is also a good idea, but you know, what else could they do to deal with that at a deeper level?
What areas of expertise do we need to explore that problem or that challenge that we're not thinking about? I mean, I think, you know, we've already talked about biology and chemistry, but what about geology or Marsology or whatever you want to? Because technically it's I guess it would be, I don't know, what would you call geology still geology on Mars? But I mean, we would need someone who knows how to go look for water. You know, what kind of rock formations are going to tell you there's water underneath, and so on and so forth. So that kind of information is going to be every bit as important as what do you do with it when you find it. So we're gonna have to
Right, I
expand
mean-
the collaborative specializations here is my point.
And, a cost comparison too, because even though the water might be there, is it worth digging into Mars to get that water? Or would it just be more economical just to produce our own water? So, there would be, so I think that's a opportunity for critical thinking with the students of, comparing the two possibilities.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And so again, the challenge that I would see would be for the tools to enable and encourage people to go outside of their normal circles of conversation, their disciplinary circles, to bring in a wide, diverse set of skills. And how do we have tools that will actively help you, not just talk to people who are thinking like you do? How are there tools for diversity in all its forms? Because diversity is diversity, whether we're talking about diversity of disciplines or we're talking about diversity of perspectives and approaches, or et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, what kind of collaborative tools are out there that encourage that, as opposed to an open circle as opposed to a closed circle? Are there tools for that? And that's definitely applicable even to Earth.
It seems to me we also need at least some basic engineering, building, design I mean, we have a 3D printer, but that's only as good as being able to set something up in there and produce it. If you're going to go out digging, you need tools. If you're going to set up a testing center, you're going to have to be able to, sometimes MacGyver stuff. So it seems to me that something that has at least some basic design principles, material information would be useful in this case.
Mm-hmm. Again, we
So-
get back to the collaboration aspect of the tools. What can we do to help with that?
And I have to say here that while this is possible, we have to acknowledge the vast computing power that will be necessary to simulate some of these things. And we should not underestimate that, because I think that sometimes, talking about VR and AR and even other applications, it comes as if any kind of laptop or any set sort of equipment will run it, and we still actually are faced with significant hardware and computing power challenges on that front. So we need to bring quite a lot of that. And I'm gonna open another field here that I work within, which I think is gonna help this tremendously, which is quantum computing. So I think that in order for us to actually run half of the things that we mentioned already in this session, we'll need quantum computing, because quantum computing is one of the ways to actually simulate materials and run them. And it's going to advance vastly what we can do in that context. And materials, different and new materials, will be one of the one of the cornerstone in actually being successful in Mars, as we need to build homes, build spaceships, build industry and other things.
Absolutely. Yep. And Maya, I don't know if you have the links handy in the chat. I unfortunately don't have them with me, but for people who don't know, there is several. IBM has one, but there are other quantum computing initiatives that allow people free access to quantum computing if you come from an academic or research institution. So strongly recommended getting on board with that.
Yeah, it's as you know, Ruben, I ran quantum computing design jams, and so this is one of the new areas, and it's slowly becoming possible to let's just say geeky people. I wouldn't say only scientists, but you still have to be geeky and geeky enough to enter it. But soon enough, I think that's I think it's some of that convergence of technologies that will enable, I think, not only the trip to Mars, but our survival there.
Great. One last point as we're wrapping up that Cynthia brought up in the text chat. Cynthia, could you take a second to discuss a little bit what you talked about, the context sharing aspect, which is a really interesting way of thinking about this, and also something along the lines of changes that could change how students think about this or get into this?
Yes, I had to look and see what I had said. Isn't that awful? Pre-copy. Yeah, we were wondering about identity. And I know that may seem strange when we're thinking about food, but we're interested in how people learn. And when they're in crisis or the need is great for a sustainability goal, right? And you've sent them to Mars, hopefully with enough stuff, and now they're having to extrapolate, right, to identify new solutions. So we were wondering in our Mars geothermal study, and we started this like in 2010, 2011, and then we ran these little experiments, and it was with military personnel from Air University. And we asked ourselves, what would happen if we weren't humanoid? If half the learners were code fragments from the matrix or water molecules, or even just a droplet of water, they shared something in context with one of the geothermal properties that they were studying. And if they went around these simulations and interacted with them to discover how to create new things from what they have, from the materials and the tools they have, would they learn better and would they remember better? And our goal here was to accelerate the process of self-discovery without us guiding or influencing it. And so we had stations that provided a certain amount of AI in the sense of knowledge sharing, and then a little machine learning with an ontology that went around classifying things and learning from the learners. So one of the things we do in our simulations is we study the people who participate in our activities. We collect data on that, and we run dashboards, and we have a little Alexa app that Andy Stricker wrote that, oops, she's going to chime in now, that allows for hands-free interaction. So we don't have to worry about typing or, or the traditional navigation challenges you might have in a VR or virtual world. Instead, they can ask for data by voice and receive it in ways that they can use within the simulation. So it was very interesting. I only brought it up because time is a critical factor when you're hungry. And during the movie, The Martian, you feel it because you know how long it takes for potatoes to grow, and you're like, the last thing you would want is to have the crop die. So you'd have to have some backup plans and some varying stages and different ways of thinking about it. And the only reason I always turn to simulation is because I can what if scenarios rapidly, manipulate time, gravity, and certain forces, and then reflect on what I've learned from that and so we see opportunities in that technology. That's all.
Absolutely.
Quite.
So we're pretty much out of time here, and I want to thank everybody for their great contributions today, first of all. We definitely want to continue moving this forward. If you have any feedback, we can talk for just a sec, but I want to give everybody an opportunity to take a break before the next session. But we will continue this conversation, and I will continue my quixotic quest to try to prioritize tasks over tools moving forward. This is really a challenge, and the thing I would like, if anything, for you guys to take away, at least as far as my part of this conversation is concerned, is to think about that and how you tend to jump straight into tools before you clearly define the tasks that you're trying to accomplish. And we went all over today trying to figure out what the tasks were we were trying to accomplish, and that's not easy. It's really hard. Because, really drilling down, are we talking about teaching? Who are we talking about teaching? Are we talking about actually building something? Are we there yet? You know, I mean, are we there on Mars? When I say are we there yet? Not the background, but you know, because I'm looking at that. But these are all questions that we have to ask ourselves. And when it comes to Mars and space travel in general, the margins of error for making the wrong decision and deciding to plant something other than potatoes that take longer to grow, and because we don't have a clear sense of what our goals are, can have tragic and disastrous consequences. But that's also true in the real world, or in the world of today. Let me rephrase that. This is all the real world. In the world of today, as we're trying to think our way through teaching. And we may only have one shot at most of the students that we have to deal with. I mean, I tell myself all the time, this may be the 100th time I'm teaching this class, but this is probably the only time that the student is taking that class. So as we think about our tools, as we're designing our classes and thinking about which tools to use and which tools not to use, you know, we have to ask really hard questions about what exactly we're trying to accomplish in that class, and then figure out what tools fit with that. And so hopefully we can build toward a system with EmTech and maybe again some sort of nexus report down the road where we can make this easier for people. And that's really what the goal is here. Any last minute thoughts from anybody else? So otherwise I'm going to hit the gavel. But
just for my part, I thank you to everybody for all your work, your contributions. I think this has been great, and I really enjoyed, you know, hearing from everybody and your thinking. So thank you all, and I'll pass the gavel back to Tom then.
Robin, do you have any parting? Nicole, do y'all have any parting thoughts?
I just want to say thanks everybody for participating, and it's a great starting point that we have. And you know, feel free to keep looking at the EmTech site. If other ideas come to you, feel free to add them to this EmTech site, or if they're on the site already, add them to our slide, even though our session's ended. Ending.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Great collaboration, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah. So it's great seeing everybody, and we will continue this conversation in July.